Welcome to the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. I'm Catherine Tomlinson and I started an eco-conscious pottery company called Oxford Clay. Now, Oxford Clay, I don't just make pottery, I also make books and courses for other potters who want to be more environmentally friendly in their pottery making. And that's what this podcast is all about. And I can't wait to get started. Let's go. In this episode, we're going to be talking about making pottery glazes. And when you're working with any powders in pottery, powdered rocks, powdered clays, ashes, you must always use an FFP3 face mask to protect your lungs. Hello, welcome back to the Oxford Clay Pottery Podcast. I'm your host, Catherine Tomlinson. It's lovely to be back here with you. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about rutile in pottery. And we're going to be talking about like what rutile is and like what it's used for in pottery. And then we're going to be talking about some alternatives to rutile if you didn't want to use rutile in your pottery. Okay, so rutile is a form of titanium ore with iron deposits. So when you see rutile, like if you saw it in like a potter's supplier, merchant or something, it's basically like a kind of brownish powder, and it's basically used in pottery like any other metal oxide, kind of coloring oxide. It's used to color glazes, pottery glazes. And sometimes rutile is used on its own. And when it's used on its own, it can create kind of like yellows, browns, oranges in pottery glazes. But it also can create this effect in a pottery glaze where you get a kind of base color, and then you'll get this kind of beautiful kind of mottled speckledy effect on top of a base glaze color. So rutile does produce that on its own, but it's often also used with another coloring oxide to give that kind of beautiful kind of misty like color effect, where the other coloring oxide will give a kind of base color. So I've seen it in books before where, for example, it's used with like cobalt carbonate. Say like cobalt carbonate, I think the recipe I saw was like 2%, and then the rutile was like 10%. And the cobalt carbonate gave this kind of sort of sea green type color in the background, and then the rutile had this kind of lilac kind of mist almost like effect over the top of it. So it does give like a really interesting, really beautiful coloring effect, and that's why potters use it. But there are, in terms of like rutile mining, there are some issues with rutile mining kind of globally, that yeah, when I was researching, so I actually researched rutile rutile mining for the book Eco-friendly Pottery: 30 Simple Ways to Make Your Pottery Practice More Ethical and Sustainable. And I actually had one of the tips in there was avoid using rutile, and that's because in different parts of the world, rutile, so it's basically mined. One of the main places it's mined is Australia, and another place it's mined is Sierra Leone. Quite a lot of the research about rutile mining in those two different regions of the world is that in Australia, some of the research suggests that rutile mining um, like takes a lot of electricity to produce basically, and that this contributes to climate change because it's mainly fossil fuels that are mining that are used. That when I was looking into this, I did find a really good journal article on this, which I will put the details of that journal article below. And it's from the Journal of Cleaner Production, and it's entitled "Towards Sustainable TiO2 Production: An Investigation of Environmental Impacts of Ilmenite and Rutile Processing Routes in Australia." And in the abstract of this article, it says that rutile production impacts greatly on climate change at 1.535 kilograms of CO2 equivalent, owing to large scale electricity consumption. So, what they're saying is basically takes a lot of energy to mine. In this article, they're saying that it also produces quite a lot of particulates, which can affect human health. And that's because fossil fuels are the main kind of source of that energy to mine the rutile. Um, so, so that's like the one of the issues with the rutile mining industry is that it takes a lot of energy to mine some areas of the globe. So another issue, so this is more centered around like the Sierra Leone, the research centered around the rutile mining industry in Sierra Leone was saying that basically one of the things that's happened in this part of the world with rutile mining is that communities have been displaced from the land in order to mine rutile, and that it was saying some of the research I was looking at when I was researching for eco-friendly eco-friendly pottery, that book, it was saying that basically this is sort of like compounded socio-economic like difficulties for those communities, and that also they have affected those difficulties have affected different like parts of that community more than others. So certain people have been like more negatively impacted than others. And a really good source of information for this part of research is that is an article I found in the Journal of Sustainable Mining, which is Mining Induced Displacement and Resettlement, the Case of Rutile Mining Communities in Sierra Leone. So I will link, I will put like the link to the book if you wanted to like have a look, read a little bit more about like eco-friendly pottery, and you know the section on rutile mining in that book. I will link that in the show notes, but I will also put the titles of those two journal articles if you wanted to read more about those specific issues in those specific parts of the world in the rutile mining industry. Okay, so what if you didn't want to use rutile in your work? So you thought, I don't necessarily want to use it. Are there any alternatives? Yes, there are alternatives, and some yeah, just to say that all the recipes I'm going to be talking to you about in this episode are from the book Eco-conscious Pottery Colour, a guide to colouring ceramics with scrap metals, glass, plant ashes, and clay. So there's loads of recipes in this book that do look like rutile-like glazes. So I thought I was looking through, I was like, I should probably only tell you about a few of them. But there are loads of them that look like rutile glazes in here. Yeah, just like read out like loads of recipes. But so the reason for that is because um plant ashes create very similar effects to rutile in glazes. And a lot of the recipes in this book, Eco-conscious Pottery Colour, which is available from the Oxford Clay website or Amazon as well if you want a paper copy. A lot of those recipes contain plant ashes because the whole idea about using them in pottery glaze recipes is that it's more sustainable because it's like a renewable source of a glaze making material. It's a renewable source, you know, like a lot of the glazes in this book are made from leaves which plants have like naturally discarded after after their growing cycle. They've naturally discarded the leaves, and as potters we can collect them, dry them, make them into ash, and then use them in pottery glazes to give a rutile effect in glazes. So let me tell you about some of these recipes. I'm just interrupting this episode to tell you about a totally free guide I've made just for you on how to make a stoneware pottery glaze. So, if you've never made a glaze before, or if you make loads of glazes and you just want a recipe, this guide is for you. It tells you everything you need to know, and it's available via the link in the show notes. Let's get on with the episode. Um, Okay, the first recipe to tell you about. So, this is recipe 6 from the book Eco-conscious Pottery Colour. And I'm going to like hold it up to the camera if you just so hopefully you can see it a little bit better. And for those of you listening on the podcast, I will just describe it for you. So basically, it's got a sort of light browny kind of caramelly background, this glaze. So a lot like if you were just using rutile just on its own as a coloring agent in a glaze. And then it's also got this beautiful kind of light blue, bluey white mist on top, where the glaze is a little bit thicker. On top of the kind of caramel color in the background is this like beautiful kind of light blue color. And this glaze is such a simple recipe. Um, like I said, it's recipe 6, and it is Cornish stone, 40 parts. And then Indian bean tree leaf ash. So these were that's from the Indian bean tree. I have a park quite close to me that has a lot of these trees in, and Indian bean trees, and I basically collected the leaves are really big, and I collected them in the autumn. They all fall at the same time. Just collected them up, made sure there was no insects in there, dried them, and then burned them, and they created this absolutely beautiful pottery glaze with no additional colour. So no additional colorants are added to this glaze at all. It's just Cornish stone 40 parts, Indian bean tree leaf ash 40 parts, which was like sieved before being made into the glaze. If you want the full kind of methodology of it, yeah, Eco-conscious Pottery Colour, you can get it in that book. But essentially, it was just sieved with a 100 mesh size sieve, and then the last part of the recipe is 20 parts quartz. So you can see that you can get a rutile type glaze with literally just like leaf ash, basically. So that's a really really cool recipe. Another really similar recipe to this is find it is actually made with like rhubarb leaves. Um, I've marked it in the book. I've marked all these recipes so I can show you them. So um, it's in this section here. So essentially, it's exactly the same recipe, but it's just using rhubarb leaves instead. And again, these were collected in the autumn. I mean, you could try doing this with rhubarb, like maybe spring rhubarb, because sometimes it's hard to know what to do with the leaves of rhubarb. It's growing in the spring, and you've got all these rhubarb leaves. You could try drying them, but making them into a glaze, but these were actually from autumn rhubarb. When the rhubarb like plant died back, I collected those leaves and then dried them again, and they created this incredible glaze. So again, this is exactly the same recipe. This is Cornish stone 40 parts, rhubarb leaves 40 parts, and then quartz 40 parts. Sorry, 20 parts. So sorry. So 40 parts Cornish stone, 40 parts rhubarb leaf, and then 20 parts quartz. And let me try and show you this one up to the camera. So I'll describe it for those listening on the podcast. It's basically it's a light bluey white glaze with a sort of like a kind of light blue. It's absolutely beautiful, this glaze. It's one of my favorite plant ash glazes. It's got this kind of it is like a kind of pearlescent, iridescent kind of sort of bluey white creamy glaze, kind of coloration on top of the kind of like a transparency white background, with some little like ever so slight flecks of brown in it, and that's just from kind of the natural like minerals and trace metals in the natural ash. um, Okay, so if you wanted to also use plant ashes with a colouring agent, you can actually get some really, really rutile-looking glazes by doing that as well. So I've picked out a couple of other recipes to show you. And these really look like traditional rutile glazes. It's absolutely incredible. So like this one is recipe 64 in the same book, Eco-conscious Pottery Colour. And let me hold this up to the camera so you can see. It's like a kind of, again, it's like a light blue kind of almost look like clouds floating in the sky of like kind of, and again, it's kind of like a pearlescent speckledy, like there's lilac in there, like purpley blue, and then some parts are transparent. It's such a beautiful glaze. So basically, that is that again is the same recipe, because it's like the base glaze is like this ash glaze, but this one uses rose plant leaves, and again these were collected in autumn from like a rose bush that shed its leaves naturally in the autumn in the UK, and I just collected these leaves up and then burned them into an ash, and well, after drying them, and yeah, it makes a really really good kind of rutile like glaze. So this recipe is Cornish stone 40 parts, rose leaf ash 40 parts, quartz 20 parts, and then the colouring agents that's used in this glaze are it's using 1% ball clay, and the ball clay it uses is high mod ball clay at 1%, and that's just because it's a very iron rich ball clay. And then it also uses red clay, which is even more iron rich, and that's at 1%. And then it uses the colouring agent verdigris at 0.2%. And verdigris, I made the verdigris, and again in this book it shows you how to make your own verdigris, just from like copper wire. Basically, it was like recycled. It was like copper wire, waste copper from electrical goods, that and all the, like, stripped the plastic off the wire, had this copper wire, and then oxidized it with vinegar and a little bit of salt, and you get this really beautiful like pigment called verdigris that you can just basically use in pottery glazes. So okay, yeah, so that was recipe 64, and then I'll just show you one more recipe because it's similar, but it's just like a lot kind of stronger color. Um, so this is recipe 78 in the book. Let me show you this here. So it's a kind of really bright, kind of turquoisey blue. And this glaze, again, it's got this kind of so it's like a kind of like a kind of turquoise blue with a kind of almost like a kind of light blue speckle on top, all kind of swirling around, and that is like a very classic rutile look. And this so this glaze, the base glaze for this is actually made from fig leaves, from a fig tree that I I collected. And fig leaves are really good for making glazes because they're really really big, so you can collect them quite quickly, and they create quite a lot of ash when you burn them. So collected them off the ground, made sure there's no animals in there. Again, this was in autumn. Yeah, made sure there's no insects in them. Dried them really really well, and then burned them, and then sieved it with the 100 mesh size sieve. And the recipe for this is Cornish stone 40 parts, fig tree leaf ash 40 parts, and then quartz 20 parts. So again, it's exactly the same base glaze recipe, just switching out the ash used each time, just from more of an experimental kind of point of view. You know, if you just had fig leaves, loads of fig leaves, actually collected them just from like a pavement, where there was a fig tree kind of like growing over, and I collected them from a sort of public area pavement. So if you have access to, like, one particular type of plant, say like, there's a few fig trees near you or something, then you can try all these different recipes just with like one plant ash. You don't have to be switching out, for rose leaf. It's just that these are the ashes which I found give really really good kind of rutile-like um, color in glazes. And then the color agent in this glaze is 3% verdigris. So this is just verdigris used, kind of stronger concentration, 3%. But again, it's made in exactly the same way with like copper wire. Yeah, and created the verdigris powder that way. So you don't need to use rutile in your pottery. There are loads of ways to get, a rutile-like glaze, literally just with like plant ashes. If you thought I don't want to use rutile, there are so many options. And yeah, plant ashes are an amazing way to go in your pottery glaze making. So, oh yeah, so it's been so nice talking to you about rutile, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you on the next episode of the Clay Pottery Podcast. And until then, I will, yeah, very wishing you very happy potting. I'll be potting too, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye. Thank you so much for joining me on that episode. And if you want to find out more about eco-friendly pottery, head over to the Oxford Clay website, which is www.oxfordclay.co.uk. Can't wait to see you there.